Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com, here with your Hurricane Pro and HD video blog for Monday, July 11th, 2016. Taking a look at what's going on in the Eastern Pacific. Fortunately, all of the action has been away from Mexico. This is Hurricane Celia, and this is another system that's going to develop. All of these will stay away from the Mexican coastline. That includes the Baja and any of the resort areas along the Pacific coast. Luckily, these will also not affect Hawaii, more than likely. But, you know, if you're in that area, pay attention. I guess that makes common sense since there's going to be several more of these developments out here. This region of the Pacific, very favorable right now, and so you never know. No specific threats right now in the long-term modeling, but just keep your eyes open. And, hey, you can track them on the apps that you've got here, right? And you'll know exactly what's going on. So this time of year, the second third of the month of July, typically the Pacific is quite busy, and we're seeing that now with Celia out there and another system getting ready to develop. The Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, not quite as busy, and the Atlantic Basin out here in the deep tropics. A few areas that have developed over the past 100 years or so, but clearly the area here off the coast of Mexico in the southeast Pacific during this time period, July 11th through the 20th, is the hotbed of activity, and we're certainly seeing that as of late. So looking at the anomalies for this starting of the week, you notice out here in the Pacific along the equatorial region, still have this growing cold area, not quite to La Nina thresholds, but continuing to cool off along the equatorial Pacific and the Gulf of Mexico, Western Atlantic here. Let me outline this. Very, very warm through this region here compared to where it normally is. And nothing to take advantage of that yet, thank goodness, but definitely warming up compared to where we're used to seeing it. Meanwhile, the subsurface temperatures in the Pacific continue to become interesting. This is kind of eroded away, just a little bit of positive anomaly showing up in the western part of the Pacific, but boy, in the eastern two-thirds, still a very large area of colder than normal water temperatures holding strong, some of those reaching the surface, as we could see on this map over here. This is what it looks like when those cold anomalies reach the surface. The subsurface is one thing, but then of course when the upwelling goes on and the strong trade winds blow across the top of the Pacific there, the surface, then it's easy to bring these waters up and they cool off at the surface, and you get that anomalous cooling, the departure from normal. Another interesting map is the upper ocean heat content, or what we call tropical cyclone heat potential, and you can see a pretty large area of the Atlantic, even out into the tropical Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf. Very warm, lots of high octane water, if you want to call it that. Nothing to take advantage of it, can't emphasize that enough, but it is there. All of this energy just waiting as we move through the month of July and into August. If something were to come along, there is plenty of fuel to take advantage of for sure. In fact, looking at the actual sea surface temperatures for you folks in the mid-Atlantic states and off the Carolina coast, warming up nicely. New England still a little chilly, but I guess it's pretty much almost always that way. But really south of Cape Hatteras on, water temperatures very warm in the low to mid 80s Fahrenheit, and that's pretty darn warm. And again, some of that upper ocean heat content through this region still pretty high. We'll have to see if that comes into play during August and September. Meanwhile, in the Gulf of Mexico, very warm. Zoom out on this map a little bit. Interesting line of demarcation here. 30 degrees Celsius and higher on the right side, and 29 degrees Celsius in a few areas that are lower, right along the continental shelf on the left side of that map. Very, very warm though. Look at that. Some of these water temperatures over here at the skin, the surface of the ocean, we're talking 28, 29, 30, and 31 degrees Celsius or higher. That's just ridiculous. You get into the water to cool off, perhaps? Not so much. This is also a great map. I love this one. This is an animation showing the total precipitable water. These tropical waves come off and add a little bit of moisture to the atmosphere. But then you have this very large area of Saharan air. We'll take a look at that at a different perspective in a moment. And then you can also see in the Pacific here how this area of deep moisture and these little spin-offs take place. This is Blas, which is now gone. And there is Celia spinning up. I'll take the annotation away. And you can see better these systems spawning out of this favorable region right through here of very deep moisture and favorable upper level winds. A lot of deep moisture over here as well around the maritime continent region. But we've only had one system to take advantage of that, and that was the typhoon, the super typhoon that made landfall recently in Taiwan and eventually mainland China. So looking at the actual Saharan air layer analysis for today, this definitely tells the story of why things are so quiet, part of it anyway. This very dry, stable air moving across the Atlantic. But you know, it's interesting, a lot has been made of the Saharan air layer, the SAL as it's called, and how dominant it is. But let's look at the legend here, the chart. Less dry air, more dry air. So, you know, yellows and oranges would be less, and reds and pinks, I guess you could say, are more. Well, I mean, this is pretty much yellows, reds, and oranges through here, so it's really not that dominant right here in the main development region between 10 degrees north latitude and 20 degrees north. The driest of that air mass is way up here in the subtropics, coming off across the Canary Islands. So maybe there's a change coming in after this burst is done and this mass of dry, dusty air gets out of the way. Some of these tropical waves might start to moisten up the environment a little bit more. We'll just have to wait and see. I mean, that's typically what happens as the season progresses. So looking at the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation right now, not really favoring any one area. All the models are showing it here in what we call the null region. But the Euro indicating an enhancement into the Indian Ocean area, sort of starting up the MJO engine again, if you will. But the GFS says, no, we're going to meander over here into the Western Hemisphere. So an interesting contrast between the two that you can clearly see there. It just boggles my mind as to why these models can't get their act together. Maybe it's the GFS, I don't know. It's just interesting to see. The bottom line is the Atlantic Basin more than likely going to stay quiet for the next week to 10 days as the Eastern Pacific remains busy, but no threats to Mexico. And, you know, again, Hawaii, just keep an eye on those things as they spin up, those cyclones, hurricanes, tropical storms, what have you. Keep your eye on those, and you know, you'll be no worse for the wear if you just make sure you're aware of what's happening. All right? Well, that's it from me for this week. Since things are nice and quiet in the Atlantic with no imminent threats, I'll be back next week. I am Mark Sudduth for HurricaneTrack.com, and of course, Hurricane Pro and HD. Have a great rest of your week ahead, and I'll talk to you again next Monday.